Hey guys, welcome into 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell here with my co-host Glenn Martin. Today is going to be a much different episode than you guys are accustomed to. We love talking about sports and we love talking about our Ravens. But this one is going to be a little different because due to the most recent events with George Floyd and others, of course, that have been affected by police brutality, we feel it important to speak on these things and just let people know how we feel about it as well.
Yes, and the Ravens released a recent 10-minute video with a montage of everyone from the owner on down, plenty of players, the president, the head coach, and even some security members I saw make an appearance. And so, and also some commenters that have commented in our on our page have made us feel like we should speak up. And I've heard some players like Justin Tucker and some other white players mention that it is important for us, white Americans to speak up as well on behalf of people of color about police brutality. So this is our take and our our piece on it. The biggest thing I want to do for me personally and how I can start is to just listen and be understanding of issues that me and Jimmy may not ever face and not even be able to relate to. So the biggest thing I want to do is listen and be understanding. And all this recent stuff was sparked with, of course, the incident with George Floyd where he was killed by the police officer was that Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
That was. And one thing I wanted to start when I start talking about that is that I was recently over at Jimmy's house for dinner, and Jimmy lives in a beautiful home, I might say, in Canton. And one thing he is lucky enough to have, and fortunate enough to have, is a rooftop deck. Which, to people like me, I think it's awesome. I love the rooftop deck. It's a gorgeous view of the city. You can see the water, you can see the stadium, you can see that Natty Bo winking at us from over top. So you can see it's beautiful. But someone like me, I have dealt with a fear of heights my entire life. I am never been good at heights. I've tried to overcome it. People say face your fear. I've been on three roller coasters, and 4 if you include the one that hits the water and shoots the water all over the bridge and people get soaked at Hershey Park. So 4 if you include that, although it doesn't go very high, but it's a little scary for someone like me. But even on the rock, I tried the rock wall. I got up. Once I looked down, my knees started shaking uncontrollably. It was embarrassing. So I have a extreme fear of heights, and just being on Jimmy's rooftop deck was bringing those feelings up to me. And we started talking about maybe, would you ever skydive? Would you ever do this? So, I looked into it, and the recent a typical skydive is about 50 seconds of free fall. So when you jump out, no chute, boom, you're flying. You're darting, 50 seconds. And then the rest, about 5 to 6 minutes of floating. And to me, that would be 5 to 6 minutes of complete and total terror. I would be shaking my body. It would be horrible. It'd be complete and totally, it'd be miserable. It's not something for me. I know that people like it. The adrenaline rush, not for me. Okay. So 5 to 6 minutes is the typical amount of terror I would be in if I skydive. George Floyd, had that knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So for almost 3 minutes longer than a typical skydive, which would be absolute terror for me. So I cannot even imagine the amount of fear that that length of time to think about what's happening to you. I'm gonna die. If someone doesn't help me, if someone doesn't get this knee off my neck, I'm going to die. And he had so much time to think about his life, his family, the people he's leaving behind. And I believe he even at the end was calling out for his mother, who I believe was deceased. I just can't imagine having that amount of fear for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It just seems like such an incredibly long time. So when people wonder why there's such frustration, there's anger, there's looting, I'm not for looting. I don't want to see I mentioned how beautiful the city is from Jimmy's rooftop deck. I don't want to see it on fire. I don't want to see smoke in the air. But I understand that they are frustrated. There's anger. I mean, everyone knows who's watched a police movie or a dramatization of police in any kind, that the fastest response time and the most aggressive response time is always due to officer down call. Anytime that an officer hears that an officer is injured or God forbid dead, that response is quick, it's aggressive, and it's usually come with pretty much the entire force behind it. So certainly we should be understanding, and the police should be understanding, why the looting and why all this frustration, this anger is directed towards them, because one of their brothers, one of their friends or family, they keep seeing, they've seen them victim to police brutality for years. So one of their brothers is dead. One of their family is now been a victim of police brutality. So of course, that their frustration, they're going to come out. They're going to be angry. They're going to respond just as police would when one of their brothers is down. So I just want to make sure that I'm going to be understanding going forward and see that this is an issue. And one thing I think that the first step we have to do is, when we look at these videos, we see usually one or two, sometimes more, but usually one or two primary aggressors from the police. In this case, it was, I believe, Officer Shaven was his last name, with his knee in the back. But what we saw around it was a bunch of police who were complicit, who had their hands in their pockets. They're not doing anything. They're not holding their fellow officers accountable. And so I don't know why that is. Maybe it's a fear. Maybe I think I've heard that if certain situations, certain stories of black police officers trying to hold their white, police officer accountable, their
counterpart
accountable, and that they've been reprimanded and sometimes fired for doing so. So what we need to do is incentivize good cops reporting bad cops, or at least encourage it, and make sure that there's some sort of accountability, at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Glenn, I really like everything you had to say, and I just want to echo those sentiments. I think it's extremely important to take note of the things that you said, and realize that, like you said, 8 minutes and 46 seconds is an eternity when you're living in that type of terror. And the imagery you painted there was moving. But the thing that I want to focus on is your last point, is the accountability and the idea that you can push accountability to someone else. That has to go away. I mean, absolutely has to go away. And in fact, every time I see these videos and I see cops standing around, I think of Milgram's agency theory, and it comes from his shock experiment. Yale professor back in the 60s did an experiment where essentially, and you guys can look up Milgram shock experiment. Essentially what he does is he takes two people. One is the teacher, one is the learner. If the learner gets an answer wrong, the teacher has the opportunity to shock that person. And they can go up in voltage all the way up, I think it's until 450 volts, right? We're talking about a severe shock here. And there's a person in a lab coat who's the third party, and when the teacher refuses to shock, they only do four things. They say, please continue. If they don't continue, they say, the experiment requires you to continue. If they still refuse, they say, it is absolutely essential that you continue. And then if they still refuse, they prod a fourth time and say, you have no other choice but to continue. The results were that 2/3 of participants continued to the highest level of 450 volts. Now, this is the conclusion of the experiment, and this is the agency theory. Milgram explained that this behavior, the behaviors of participants, suggested the two states of behavior and two states of agency, if you will. The autonomous state, people direct their own actions, responsibility results. But the agentic state, people allow others to direct their actions, then pass off the responsibility for the consequence of that person giving the orders. In other words, they act as agents for the other person's will. And there are two factors that go into this. The person giving the orders is perceived as being qualified to direct the other people's behavior. And this is the big one. The person being ordered about is able to believe that the authority will accept responsibility for what happens. That's a huge one. So anytime a police officer can say, well, my backside is covered because I got a scapegoat right there next to me.
Yeah.
This is going to continue to happen. We at 410 Sports Talk detest police brutality in any shape, form, or fashion, and we will always stand against it. And like Glenn said, if you want to take a step forward, it is about these types of things being put in place, holding those police officers accountable, and making sure that these issues don't repeat themselves. I learned from a wise person once that we are citizens of the world. We all need to take care of our brothers and sisters, period. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are. And one of the things I love, and I'm so proud, and I'm sure you are too, Glenn, is to be a Ravens fan and to have a show that talks about the Ravens. Is the video that they put out was awesome. I mean, it was listening, it was opinionating, it was open dialogue. I just want to mention a couple things. Anthony Levine said, Coach always talks about being comfortable, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. We need to do that in conversation. The other thing I want to mention is John Harbaugh said that he's embarrassed as an American, not as a white male, not as a black male, not as anything, as an American. This is an American issue. And I love, of course, the quote that he gave that, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Remember that when we are standing up for police brutality, and make sure that we do our part in affecting change.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you're right. I think the accountability is the biggest thing that is what I've been hearing, is that people want to know that the police who participate in any form of police brutality are going to be held accountable. I mean, these are the individuals that are supposed to be the trained professionals. So these are the ones that receive the training and also receive the firearm. So if they're going to have that level of if they're going to have that level of power, they have to have a level of responsibility to match that. And it's not okay if you are a police officer who maybe not is directly participating in police brutality, but you're standing by, then you're complicit. If you see it, you need to hold your fellow officers accountable. That's just the bottom line. And that means it needs to be formal, and it needs to also be not just a formal written, but it needs to be in the moment. You need to pull that knee off of the suspect's neck. You need to hold it right in the moment, because it can't be just wait till something bad happens and then we react. It has to be proactive and not reactive. And that's just my thing. And another thing I wanted to point out, when I was leaving your house, Jimmy, is driving home. I left your house about 10:30 or so, and when I left, there was a lot of noise going around the city. There was police helicopters, and as I was leaving the city, I passed quite a few police officers where their outside lights were lit, and I have to be honest. As I'm passing those officers on just one lane road, 2-lane road, I should say, one in each direction, I found myself making sure I stared forward. I didn't even want to look in their direction. I felt a nervousness, a fear of police interaction, because when I turn on my phone, I turn on Reddit, I pull up YouTube, I name the source, any social media, Twitter, you see countless videos of police brutality in response to protests and rioting, looting. And it made me nervous to just drive by them. And I just don't want to we need police. We absolutely need police, but we need to feel safe when they're there. I mean, there should be no safer place than in a building or establishment where there's police there. You should feel the utmost safe, because you should say, well, there's not going to be any criminal activity here, because these guys will step in. They will stop the crime. They will protect us, innocent citizens. I should not have a level of fear when I'm just simply driving by, and this is coming from me, who's a pretty obvious white guy. So I can't imagine how that fear must be doubled, tripled, or magnified to whatever degree if I was a black guy. I just can't. So for me, I can't relate, but I can say this, that I now feel nervous around police officers, and I'm worried next time I have an encounter. I just don't want us to live in a world like that. I teach my son; he admires police. I wanted to be a police officer when I was younger. I went to school to pursue that. Realized it probably wasn't for me, because I understand how hard and a difficult of a job it is. So it just wasn't for me. I wasn't cut out for it. But I teach my son that a police officer is an admirable position. It's a position where we should respect these men and women. and admire that they do a very difficult job for a very low pay. So I just want to make sure that we understand we need police, but we need to feel safe when they're around.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the one thing I'll say in addition to that is that it's important to remember one of the things that I have kind of gotten not kind of I've absolutely grown tired of this rebut by certain people about the instance. And that's all we're speaking about at this point. There's so many other ways we can go with this conversation, but if you're speaking about this situation, police brutality towards people and people of color, it doesn't matter what the person's record is, doesn't matter, what their priors are, what they're labeled as. It doesn't matter. Everyone has the right to due process, and failing to give people of color or of any situation the right to due process is despicable. You are not a police officer is not a judge, jury, or an executioner. They are a servant of the people, a protector of the people. And then the law will take care of the rest. But it is not their right to oppress the rights of other people. It is not. It is absolutely not their right. Never will be, never has been. And, we need to do our part to make sure that proper reforms, and steps are taken to make sure, like you said, Glenn, that those people are held accountable when they do cross that line. So one of the things I know that Glenn and I mentioned and we think is super important is to go do that. Protesting is super important, and we support everybody's, right to be able to do that in a peaceful fashion. We also believe that it is, people sacrifice their lives, and we defend our rights as Americans, all of us, to go vote.
Yes.
So get out there and vote for what you believe in. Don't be a bystander. Go vote.
And I've heard so many people say, I'm just one vote. I'm just one voice. Why do I want to do it? What difference can one voice make? And I just hope people understand that is the worst mentality. If ever, the only thing we have is that vote. That's the only voice we really have. I mean, yes, we can peacefully protest, but we are given this wonderful opportunity to be able to have our say in it. And let me just tell you, I didn't realize until I first voted the sense of gratification you get when you leave. You feel proud of yourself when you leave that voting ballot. When you leave that voting booth, you just feel like you contributed. Your voice was heard. And that way, when you're complaining and you're not happy about the way things are, you can say, look, I made my voice heard. I can now, because if you're not going to go out and vote and you're above 18 years of age, even if you don't like the candidates, I'll say that, because I know a lot of people say, I didn't vote for Trump or Clinton because I didn't like and that's fine if you don't like but at least make your voice heard. Write a name in. Do something. Just make your voice heard. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter. Just vote. Just get out and make your voice heard. That's all I'm saying. And you'll feel so good, because the young people just don't vote like we should. We wait till we get middle age before it seems like a lot of people go out and vote. So just please go out and vote.